Jonah Coleman should be a huge factor against Indiana.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars got a really fun show coming out of the Everydayers today. We're going to talk about Washington's pass rush and their defensive line in general against this Indiana offense, which has been just lethal all season long. We're going to talk about Washington's offensive line, and which will probably be without left tackle Maximus McCree this weekend. We'll jump into that, but we're going to start with Jonah Coleman, who Jedd Fisch talked about saying, yeah, we haven't practiced him much over the last couple of weeks. We wanted to make sure that he really got healthy, because I don't know about you, Lars, but I had a lot of people in my mentions after that saying, oh, when did this happen? This was never talked about. I know we covered it briefly, where Jedd said that he got nicked up late in the Rutgers game. That's why he wasn't in late in the game. And kind of looked like he was fine against Michigan. Maybe, there was some more wear and tear that came out of that game. But no matter what, this is a really good sign for Washington moving forward.
Yeah, and then also just kind of combine how violent Jonah runs, like both how hard he cuts and how physical he runs. There was no need to push him against Michigan when you had a 10-point lead. And again, the other side of this coin is you have Cam Davis, you have Adam Muhammad, you have a number of backs in that room, so you shouldn't have to ride Jonah until the wheels fall off, especially early in the season. You could kind of sense from Jedd speaking on Monday over the past couple of weeks, it was like, just get to the bye week. Just get to the bye week. And we initially thought it was like, maybe it's Quentin Moore, maybe it's, X, Y, and Z, maybe it's Durfee. And it's like, the more you kind of step back and then you watch the Iowa game back, and it's like, well, even if that game doesn't get away from Washington, I'm not sure Jonah gets more than 12. Just the way
Sure.
that, but part of that is also Jonah gets big gains when he runs. And so kind of keeping those explosives for Jonah against Penn State, against Indiana this weekend, like you're going to need that. Like Will's great. Damon's great. The quarterback situation is what it is. But Jedd kind of finally, after what we've been asking for how many weeks now, what is your identity? Jedd basically finally came out and said it today. We want to run the ball. Now, yes, we want to have a quarterback who can take shots and do all those sort of things. But Jedd basically laid it out. He's like, look, we want to be a running team. And now this isn't Jimmy Lake just run the damn ball. But at the same point, it's like, well, we saw that under Sark. We see that under pro-style offenses. You go look at the Seahawks in the NFL. When Ken Walker's going good, Geno Smith's life is a lot easier. That doesn't mean Geno's bad. It means Ken Walker's that Jonah and Ken Walker, you kind of just see the similarities. I'm not saying they're like for like, but again, both Big Ten running backs, both physical, and that's kind of what Washington needed to be. And you can kind of sense against Iowa, it's like, ooh, they don't really have that physical bell, post Jonah, and that kind of, during the bye week, I'm not sure where you can get that other than Jonah. So that's why it was so important to get him rested.
So I absolutely agree with you there. And then it's something when another thing that Jedd talked about where, the run heavy thing, I'm not so sure about that when, you dive into some of the numbers and you see, okay, 57% pass to 43% run. Like that's the numbers show a little bit of a different story there. But when I look at this and I look at Jonah, I see, okay, yeah, where, I know we saw some other stuff on social media where it's like, oh, is Jonah going to get, 20, 25 carries? Still doesn't feel like that's ever really going to be in the cards for him. Just, not necessarily just because of little things like this, where he does get nicked up against Rutgers and, it kind of lingers for a week or two. Maybe that's kind of what I'm assuming was the explanation here. But when I look at this, I also just see, okay, Washington is going to need to establish the run early and often this weekend, because one of the best ways to, negate this high-flying, up-tempo Indiana offense is to not necessarily turn into Iowa and, just grind the clock, run the ball over and over and over and over again, but it's to make sure that you can sustain drives, which is something that Washington at times has been able to do this season. And when they're running the ball effectively, they're doing that really, really well. And this could be a huge game for Jonah against, an Indiana defense that the numbers against the run are really good. But something else that Jedd alluded to is, when they're up 7-14-0 really, really early on in every single game, teams are going to get away from the run. And that's something like we talked about it on the Monday show, Lars. cannot happen in this game. And a lot of that is going to come down to Jonah Coleman and this whole running backs room, really, Cam Davis, Adam Muhammad as well. But Jonah Coleman specifically, since he's arguably the best player on this offense, doing his job early and often.
Yeah, this game is kind of the ironic bowl, if you think about it, where Washington has the number one pass defense in the Big Ten. Iowa has the number one run defense in the Big Ten. Both are kind of similar because, like, well, you don't really have to pass that much against Washington when you can run so well, and vice versa, when you're kind of playing catch up. And I think that's part of also both on Washington and what Indiana has seen this season. When you're up 14-0, 21-10, your teams are going to be passing more because, you can't just run them. Rarely, aside from Ashton Jeanty, are you going to put the ball in your running back's hands on no matter what down and distance it is, or whether it's 2nd and 2 or 2nd and 11, because Ashton Jeanty is the one guy who's going to be able to get you that. Jonah, when you saw against Michigan, was able to get a significant number. The next week, after that, it's kind of like, oh, okay, now we see a little bit of a dip here, and then you go to Iowa and even more so, and then it's like, okay, we need Jonah at his fullest, especially coming out of the bye week, because this is really going to be a tone-setting week. And we talked about it on Monday's show, where this is kind of your prove-it game. This is your measuring stick game, whatever you want to say. That's what everybody said about the Indiana-Nebraska game. Let's be real. I'm not saying Washington is straight up better than Nebraska, but I'm willing to bet 8 out of 10 times they're winning that game this year, especially like Washington doesn't play Indiana, so we got to hypothesize here. But, you just look at Indiana, and it's like, okay, if DeMond was your quarterback, or in Nebraska, DeMond was your quarterback, sure. Then you've got freshman quarterbacks, and you can kind of see the correlation there. Washington should bring a better punch than Nebraska did. But Indiana, in their own right, is very good. And we saw how, Washington's been exposed in the run game on defense. And so shoring of that, it's a weird thing of where we see explosive plays and you think passing. It's like this game actually might be determined on the ground more than the arm, especially with Indiana having a quarterback and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's, we'll talk about Tayven Jackson and his ability to run as well. But I certainly like where you're going there, where, Washington, I like this offense. I really do. The play calling in short areas, like down in the red zone, we need to see that improve before I can really say, all right, I'm fully confident in this offense at this point. But we've talked about this for weeks, Lars. It's all these numbers have shown is that the offense is taking steps in the right direction. It's moving the right way. And Jonah has been probably the biggest catalyst for all of that, I want to say, this season, where I would say Denzel has probably had the best year of any player so far, just in terms of what he's done, where he ranks in the Big Ten in terms of touchdowns, yards, catches, all that sort of stuff. But Jonah has been the catalyst, and as you've called him many times, the heartbeat of this offense, and he's been what's making them go. And when you think about what this matchup is against a really good Indiana team in Bloomington, he needs to show up and have a huge game.
Yeah, he really does. And I think that would also help Will. That helps we're talking in red zone. Then here's the thing. If you have a dynamic run game, now you have a dual threat with or without DeMond and quarterback in the red zone, because you don't know, are they going to try and run it against us, or are they going to do the jump ball to Denzel or Jeremiah or Kalecki, the latter two of which we haven't really seen this season, but we know Denzel can do it. So that automatically makes the play calling easier for Jedd. And then you just have to pray that there's no self-inflicted wounds. So on top of, if you can basically get out of your own way, it's easier said than done, right? Again, if we could just, hypothesize as well, if you block better than the other team and you execute your cuts better than the other team, you're going to likely win the game. It's like, bravo, well done, good job. You want to, it's like, no, but again, obviously, yes, it's easier said than done. And we'll talk more in the next segment about, the offensive line was. But really, even without the best offensive line, we've seen Jonah make that work. And we saw it against Michigan, especially where it's like, Voigt to Newby can clear a lane out. There's plenty of ways that Jedd has been able to show that he's got an idea or ideas to solve these certain areas. It's just putting it all together. And so it's like, the bye week, let's get everyone together. Get everyone healthy. Carson, you'll be no contact. X, Y, and Z, you'll be no contact. Let's make it through this week. Let's not hurt ourselves in practice before we even get to the game. And now, you got a big stage. I mean, if you can beat Indiana with game day, the setting of game day in the background and 7-0 and all that, it's a significant win for Jedd. But again, it will not be easy, especially in the trenches.
Lars, I couldn't have said it any better myself. In the trenches is where this game will probably be won and lost. And without Maximus McCree, what does that look like for Washington? We'll get the red left message from our friends over at Roy. Hey, Locked On Huskies fans, time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. And with the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, we're supporting Ashton JT on Washington's bye week. It's hard not to, right? We pitched in $100. We'd love for you to join us. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Ashton JT the love and keep him connected to the school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets up your team for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered already on Roy. Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. So, Lars, looking at this offensive line, Maximus McCree, we knew he was going to be a significant part of it. And then Jonah Coleman really struggled against Iowa after he was out with the dislocated thumb, which Jedd Fisch said is probably going to keep him out again this week against Indiana. And the question begs, we just talked about Jonah Coleman and establishing the run game. Can Washington's offensive line hold up?
You know what's great about two names we've already talked about before getting to blocking is who the 2 highest graded pass blocking players are for Washington, Boyd Tanufi and Jonah Coleman. That gives you a sense of where I'm going with this answer. It's a real test. It's a real test because you look at the third player on the list, actually is kind of the guy that I'm most intrigued to see, and it's Kelly Tavai. But we got to see both Jonah Coleman and Kelly Tavai against Iowa. Worth noting, Jedd did mention, I'm sure you remember after the Iowa game, hey, Sewanee has kind of been banged up, so we threw him in there, but he wasn't at 100%. Kelly Tavai's kind of been that best second option when healthy, and I think that's the key because I don't think Sewanee's been fully healthy, and so it's kind of hard to truly judge. Yeah, is he maybe, we don't know what the injury is. Jedd doesn't really specify it, but Jedd doesn't specify what the injury is until after the player has recovered. Or he knows he's clearly going to be out like Quentin Moore with it's an MCL injury. He's going to be out for a while. We thought it was just 1 to 2 weeks. It's going to be like 1 to 2 months here.
So I certainly see what you're saying there. I agree where I'm interested to see what that looks like. Where is it going to be a split like we saw in week 2 and week 3, where obviously in week 3 against Washington State, that's when Jonah Coleman originally went down with an injury. But on top of that, I'm just curious to see what this is going to look like, where Sewanee's had some struggles where he's a redshirt freshman and he's very clearly still learning some technique things. He's got a lot of things to straighten up and to figure out, which is okay. And for where he is in his development, those things take time. And when he was originally recruited by Scott Huff, we knew that. We knew those things were going to happen. And it sucks that he's had to be thrown into this position of, all right, we kind of have to throw you into fire. Or that's what a lot of this seems to be. And you could say the same thing about Kelly Tavai. Obviously, they came in together in the same class, where Jedd Fisch also said they might try Drew as a party out at left tackle a little bit. If that happens, I'm curious to see what that looks like. But when I look at this offensive line, we've seen the interior get better week in and week out, where it's still not there. It's not, but it's very clearly building, and there's clear progression being shown there.
All right, I got some numbers for you. I wasn't trying to cut you off. I was just when you said you were.
No. I know where you're going with this. Yeah,
the Jonah Hill clip of get him off the stage. Let's go. So again, now we get worth caveating. Everything is new system. Drew as a party wasn't even a full-time starter at San Diego State last season. Started the back. I want to say the last 6 or 7 games at San Diego State at right tackle. So really, this is his first full season as a starter. So again, as much as we want to be critical, they are 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Yes, they're getting paid, but you don't want to harp too much on it, right? Because again, a lot of this is as Jedd has kind of hinted at and sprinkled in throughout the season. This is building the next year. This is laying the foundation. So if this is their worst year, like how they came into fall camp saying, hey, we want this to be our worst practice. We want this to be our worst X, Y. So the next, as you keep moving forward, it gets better and better. We want this to be your worst season yet. So if this is your worst season, fine, get it all out next year. That way you're ahead of the curve as a redshirt sophomore. You still have 2-3 years left.
So on top of that, I think one thing that's interesting to note is Jedd, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because Jedd talked a lot today about, he was, as we record this on Monday after his press conference, Jedd was very complimentary of Curt Cignetti and the job he's done at Indiana. Obviously, he's done a fantastic job over there. But one of the things that he talked about was how early he got the job and saying, yeah, he had the December transfer portal window to build this and to do this and do that. And he referenced himself and a couple of people who got jobs later on in the cycle saying, we didn't necessarily have that luxury. And I'm sure there are going to be some people who say that's an excuse. You got to figure it out. But at the same point, I kind of hear where he's coming from and saying we didn't necessarily have the same crop of players to choose from or even go after, really not choose from. That's probably not the right wordage here, but go after in terms of the transfer portal and build the line maybe the way that we wanted to.
Well, and you can obviously with the offensive line, look at the guys in Arizona. How many players from James Madison followed Curt Cignetti to Indiana?
Right.
13. I believe, what is it? 7 on defense, 6 on offense, somewhere in that.
Yeah.
So it's an almost not even split, but it's again, and James Madison was a very good offense. So bringing a lot of those guys naturally, okay, they already know where they're going. Yeah, we talked about Jonah Coleman being the heartbeat of the offense, but it was him, Audric Harris, Damon Williams, Adam Muhammad. And I'm being generous when I say these are the other Arizona guys they got. They didn't get Jonas Savaitis. They didn't get, some of the other
Wendell Moe, some of those sort of guys, yeah.
And now, again, the ironic part is you go look at Arizona this season and Arizona not necessarily lighting it up in the Big 12. So, how much of it is, when Jedd said early on, it's like, well, we can't really talk to these guys at Arizona because, it's like, well, we want to talk to them, but we can't. And it does kind of – Jedd was put in a very tough, small box. I'm trying to do a box right there. I'm making sure it's not a circle. I'm trying to make sure I can get a square or something. There we go. Well, that's what I was trying to go, but I'm trying to make it more like a 3D box. Anyway.
Fair enough.
But the point being where it's can't talk to your Arizona players, so it's not like free agency where, hey, once the thing is open, we can talk to your agent, we can talk to X, Y, and Z. Now, yeah, could they have backs? First of all, you don't think Jedd tried people? Like, again, I'm just saying, like, it wasn't for a lack of Jedd.
I'm sorry, I want to cut. I don't think that's a road we should go down. Where
no, I'm saying because he couldn't. I'm sure.
No, you're right. You're right.
For a lack of like, oh hey, I'm just going to build this roster with whatever I got. He can only work with what he got. That's why I started by saying with the box. Like, Jedd was put into a very small box, and Kalen, the only real other guy who was in that mix, had the luxury of inheriting a Nick Saban roster. Kalen did not leave the Nick Saban level of talent. Now again, cupboards weren't totally bare. So when you look at the offensive line, especially, Parker left, the Kalepo and Buelo go to the SEC as well. There were so many, and then you talk about Fontano, Rosegard, your tackles going, but everything is new. And basically everything kind of got thrown together in a 3-month time span because even with the spring, I remember telling Matt Castle with Big Ten, hey, don't even pay attention to the offensive line right now. Like, take notes maybe for 25 and 26 and 27, but the offensive line you see right now and the offensive line now being playing on Saturdays this fall is going to be completely different. And it has been. But in a small window like that, you can't necessarily expedite that, 3, 4, 5 months. And so now that you get to the middle of the season, great, you're almost there. But now Max is out. And so you're back to the veterans who aren't veterans. And can we just end the Drew as a party to left tackle? We saw it against, I think, Northwestern. We saw it a couple of times against Michigan.
We saw it against Weber State. Yeah.
Weber State too. I feel like we've seen it a couple of games this season.
We certainly have
Drew on the right. Let's just leave Drew on the right side. I think it's pretty clear that
this is
his best suit is on the right side. You can flip him. Who's going to play right tackle? Kaylee? Why not just keep everything what it's been? Because we only saw him mix it up like 3 or 4 times in fall camp.
So you're right. We saw it a lot in the spring, obviously, with very different circumstances, where it's clear that they wanted to try him there, and he's just more comfortable on the right side. But one thing that we really need to get into here is Indiana's pass rush. Indiana's tied for the conference lead in sacks. They're tied with Nebraska with 21 sacks in 7 games. So that's where I look at this and I say, all right, what is this offensive line going to do to hold up? Because we've seen in each of the last couple of games, so that's Iowa and that's Michigan, they've let up 4 sacks in each of those games. That's something that needs to change. And that's something where, obviously we've seen what Indiana does when they get ahead early. They play fast, they go up tempo, and they're able to put up a whole bunch of points. You can't fall victim to those sorts of things. You can't fall victim to these negative plays and all these other things, which have killed Washington. They killed them against Iowa. They killed them in a couple other games as well, where you look at like against Rutgers, they had a couple of them here and there, but a lot of that came on penalties as well, granted. But when you look at this game, that's the one thing you cannot have happen. You cannot fall victim to the sacks. You can't play into their hands. And the offensive line can be key in allowing that. If Will Rogers has time and Will Rogers is able to deliver, I think that this offense can stay on time and ahead of the sticks. But if you fall behind, which is, why we talked so much about Jonah early on, things are going to get messy really, really quickly. And in a game where Indiana especially is favored by 6.5, that can't happen.
And not only that, what's the one game Jedd mentioned on Monday, the Maryland game, when it was 28-all at halftime? That was a 5-sack game for Indiana. So that's a game where even if you're close at halftime, it's still 0-0. You got to go back out and play another 30 minutes. And that's why Jedd talked about when they play 60 minutes, not 47, and those 13 kind of come at different times. Like, whatever it takes to play a full game, gentlemen.
That's one of the most important things. And Lars, we talked about Indiana's passions a little bit. Let's talk about Washington's. Right after the message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And I hope that means some of you listened to me when I talked about it on the Friday show, and I said, hey, Jamar Chase, Nick Chubb, and Kenneth Walker anytime touchdowns. That was a fantastic one. I know that one ended up hitting. Let's check out some of this other stuff moving forward. It sucked to see Jaden Daniels go down with an injury. Hopefully he doesn't have to miss too much time because I still love his Rookie of the Year odds over on FanDuel. And another one that I'm really starting to like, especially after watching them win over the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday, is this Detroit Lions team. I would certainly just go check out all their odds, Super Bowl, NFC North, everything. Go check them out over on FanDuel. So, Lars, I'm really interested to see what Washington's defensive line is going to do against this Indiana passing offense. We know it's going to look a little bit with Tayven Jackson. He's going to run the ball a little bit more. He's a little more mobile than Kurtis Rourke is. But outside of that, it looks like Indiana's passing offense wants to stay on schedule. The more I've looked at it, the more I say, all right, Kurtis Rourke is in a rhythm early and often. He's getting the ball out quickly. He's not moving off his spot, and he's able to deliver the ball in rhythm. I don't know what it's going to look like with this Washington pass rush. I'd love to see what Zach Durfee is going to bring to the table. Jedd Fisch said it's going to be great to have him back, that he should be able to play, and doesn't sound like he's going to be super limited. We'll see what that ends up looking like. But moving forward, I think this could be a really big game for Washington's defensive line, where we've seen Steve Belichick scheme up a lot of good things up front in the pass rush. And this could be a prime example of he's cooking up some things that are a little bit different.
Exactly. One, and you also, another player he mentioned was Isaiah Ward. Jedd basically just came out flat out. Now, again, to be fair, the question was perhaps specifically about Isaiah Ward, so Jedd didn't just straight up go after Isaiah Ward and say,
right,
no, Isaiah Ward's got to have his best game. It didn't just come out of left field. Because again, it is worth clarifying. Because some coaches do say, you know what, it's like, hey, Will's got to be on it today. When you talk about the offense, Will's got to be on it today, or Jonah's got to be on it, or so and so. So worth noting that little bit of context, but it kind of feeds into everything we're saying, where Washington has been able to get pressure at times this season, but hasn't been able to finish. Go back to the Apple Cup where it's, hey, could you even contain John Material, do all these sort of things? Really, I mean, I think that kind of seems to be Steve's bread and butter, is make sure contain first and then pressure. He hasn't necessarily gone out of his way to pressure a ton this season. We've seen him get home, and we talk about limited bodies. Voight and Dupe, he's kind of an undersized guy, so we can only play in, work in situations sort of thing. And we've seen plenty of Alfonso Jupitala. So it's more or less with a healthy or fully healthy Carson Brunner, does Alfonso get freed up more to do certain things? I think that fifth or sixth guy, probably more five, because if you think about the receivers we talked about on Monday's show, probably being in dime coverage for the most part, or at least nickel, base nickel, potentially in dime, depending on how much Indiana wants to spread it out. Because you're talking about 4 and 5 receivers there that can really, really get out there. So does Kirk Cincinnati want to test him and stretch, or do you want to ground and pound and see if you can just win an out physical like I would?
So that comes exactly back to what we talked about yesterday with Kurtis Rourke and how that might change this game plan. I don't know how much it really will, Tayven Jackson had a really good game when he came in. But we'll see. Are they going to try to run the read option with him a little bit more? Are they going to spread it out and do that as well, where, maybe you'll have a matchup advantage there that you like? There are a whole lot of different ways that they can play this, and I just want to see how Steve Belichick is going to counter that. I know it's something I pointed out on the show once or twice this year. There have been multiple points this season where it's looked like a running down, but Steve has countered with pass rush personnel and been correct with whatever it is he sees from the personnel, whatever it is he sees from the grouping, where down and distance don't seem to matter. He just says, all right, I know what personnel is going out there on the field. I see this. I know this is what's going to happen. And I think this could be a great example of that, where I think he can do a really good job of matching up with Indiana. I think that this is where I'm really interested in this game. I was talking with our good buddy Jake Butt the other day, and one thing he said about this matchup is this is one of the best coach teams I've ever seen. And that starts with Kurt Cignetti and everything they're doing offensively. Obviously, they got Mike Shanahan calling the plays over there. That's really fun to see as well, where I think this is going to be a really, really fun matchup between Mike Shanahan and Steve Belichick. And, if you were telling me this is an NFL matchup, I think that'd be a lot of fun. Okay, that's really cool. But seeing it at the college level is its own interesting thing. And I think watching those two spar is going to be a really, really awesome chess match to watch. I'm trying to find the right words to use here. It's going to be a really fun chess match. But on top of that, I think that Steve has the scheme that it takes to find a way to get some of these guys out of rhythm. And I think especially with Kurtis Rourke being out, that might be something that he's going to try to find a way to take advantage of. And I know Tayven Jackson's experience. I'm not trying to downplay that in any way, but Indiana has done so many good things with Kurtis Rourke this season that switching up the rhythm might play to a slight advantage for Washington. I'm not trying to say it's, going to totally tip the tables.
It's funny. When you said Mike Shanahan, I actually had to go back and pause for a second, because every time I hear that name, I think of former head coach Mike Shanahan, like the actual, the original shit Mike Shanahan, like way, way back. So
that's why
I was like, wait a minute, there's no way that 84-year-old guy is calling plays for Kirk Cignetti. I mean, I respect it, but it's one of those, like, really, you're not working for Kyle? But no, it all brings back kind of, if you think about it, there's so many different kind of chess pieces too. This is a great analogy of this chess match, because you got Vinny Cincinnati as the safeties coach, Tino Cincinnati, quarterbacks coach, passing game coordinator in Indiana. So you're looking at this and saying, okay, what's a pass rush's best friend? Over the top safety help. I think that really has been the key for Steve this season, when we see Cam Fabikian and Cam Broussard really kind of be that either guy that comes down in the box and makes an impact in the run game, or forces the quarterback into passing, and then you let your DBs cook and do all those sort of things. Though I feel like the safeties kind of could be the X factor, which again helps the pass rush, because again, if the safeties aren't able to get their job done, you're probably not having as effective as a pass rush. And so to me, one kind of feeds off the other. And Jedd listed off the guys: Lance Holtzclaw, Isaiah Ward, Boynton Newby, even Deshaun Lynch, I think, doesn't really get enough credit for being a true pass rusher in that sense, because again, you don't necessarily think of him and think speed, especially next to Isaiah Ward. But there's all those types of different bodies that Steve can use. And I think that's what makes it such an appealing chess match, because it's not just Washington going into a base defense and okay, we're just going to throw Isaiah Ward and just 40, 50 reps of Isaiah and see what happens. No, we got a bunch of different looks we could throw. We'll see which one works early and often.
But on top of that, it's something that you and I talked a little bit about again on yesterday's show, just to keep throwing it back over there, because this is one of the themes of the week, right? Is the most interesting battle in this game is going to be Indiana's passing attack versus Washington's secondary, where it's a best on best sort of matchup. And we know this Husky defense, and the secondary in particular, has done a really good job defending the pass. But this is a completely different challenge. And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of man coverage, because that's just what Steve Belichick likes to do. They're probably going to leave, the too high safety look just to try to defend them from, trying to find a way to attack downfield. But that's why it's going to fall on the pass rush to get home. And we know these corners can hold up in man coverage because we've seen it, but not against this type of offense yet.
And that's the thing is, again, you've seen good offenses. I think while I'm not saying they're like for like, but I think you've seen enough offenses to where Steve has a good idea of, okay, this is how my scheme holds up in the college level against this type of play and this type of play. And it doesn't work against this. Well, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but we have weaknesses here. And so now coming out of the bye, it's like, okay, similar to the offense, can you all put it together? You're getting Durfee back fully healthy. You got an extra week. Carson could be another impact guy. And I think all these guys coming back at full health really give Steve all the pieces to work with, where he's not saying, oh, well, if I had X or if I had, so-and-so. It's like, no, everybody's there. I mean, the only one you don't have is J-Bar. I get that. But it's the only one you're not going to get. So,
Right.
And Steve's never going to be a guy to say, hey, well, if I don't have J-Bar and Parker, we're kind of SOL. It's like, no. Steve's going to say, who can be the next J-Bar? Linnaeus Davis. I don't think Linnaeus has gotten a lot of, not a lot of pressure, but an underrated amount of pressure up the middle when he's been able to play. And so is Linnaeus another guy. Bryce Butler, we haven't seen a ton out of him. There's just so many. This seems like a game where a lot of guys could possibly emerge that maybe we're not even talking about, in addition to Ward, Durfee, the guys that we already know about, because it's going to be a 4-quarter game. And so finding all those bodies, when we were going through in the fall camp saying, how are all these guys going to find playing time? And Jane Wayne, how is he going to get playing time? How Voy, is he the odd man out? It's like, seems like, no, rotate in. We're going. Right. This is a never ending, until that clock hits 000, we're rotating. And I think that's actually going to be a strength for Washington more than a detriment.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all every day for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first. When everyone else overlooks it, you can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or else you listen to your podcast. And with that being said, if you like what we've got going on over here, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.